Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of the NWBA Wonder Room. I'm your host, King Vasser. Thank you for watching. Coming up on this week's episode, season starts tonight. We have Versus Seeker opening night. We have concluded with the draft. We have our rosters. We have our factions. We've got all the introductory information that you've needed since our initial episode. So it's going to be a bit of a quick one. We're just going to break down the rosters, break down people's Terra captains, how exactly the system is going to work, and then take a look at the schedule and such for the upcoming week. Now, let's get right on into it. First up, League factions. We have put the 16 GMs through a randomizer, and we have gotten to our league alignment. So first up is Ruby League. We have the Lava Ridge Cyndaquils, GM by Avery. The Alfrenata Rated R Super Tars, GM by Chris. The Lentimus Town Luxrays, GM by Keg. The New Moon Island Swaddle Waddlers, GM'd by Nico. The Sunny Source Supercharge, GM'd by defending champion Spike. The Akala Island Speed Stars, GM'd by me, Vasser. The Veilstone Valiants, GM'd by Will. And finally, the Treasure Tyrantars, GM'd by Zedby. Really interesting league that we have for Ruby League. You're talking about potentially two of the best newcomers in Avery and Chris. And I believe Nico is no slouch either. Plus you got the defending champion in Spike, someone who has made NWBA finals both in Vasser and Will. And then lastly Zedby, who's got a few playoff sets to his name. So this is a bloodbath of a league on paper. Like, this is essentially the NBA Western Conference. Obviously a lot can happen over the course of the season. That's why you play 22 sets. A lot can happen, but just on paper, this is going to be a fight to the death just to get in the playoffs, let alone the fight for avoiding the wild card spot. Next up, we have the Sapphire League. First up, the Newburgh Town Frozo, GM by CJ. The Mount Hokulani Cosmos, GM by Kami. The Mali City Magnamites, GM by Kevin. The Humila Haxorus, GM by Kobu. The Lavender Town Spectral Thieves, GM by Logan. The Verbank Venoshocked, GM by Muffin. The New Bark Blix, GM by Rhino. And finally, the Humila City Hooligans, GM by Trey. This is more of our older guard division, or league rather. You got Kami, Kevin, Kobu, Muffin, all players who have been around all 5 seasons now of the NWBA. Logan has been around for now 4 of them. Trey's been here for 3. It's still a strong group, right? You still got a lot of people who have won plenty of playoff sets. Kobe's made it into NWBA finals. Kami, Logan, Kevin, they've all made it to league finals before. A bit more wide open. Well, actually, technically a bit less wide open than the Ruby League. But still, there's plenty of things to be solved around here. I think just interesting that in the cases of Kami and Kevin deciding to pivot to brand new locations and teams. They've been rocking Twin Leaf and Lilyco for so long. It's interesting to see them make that change. But, new generation, freshen up the pace. I respect it. I like it. So, moving on to the rosters. The draft has concluded. So let's just break down the rosters real quick. Lava Ridge in OU, you have Walking Wake and Torkoal. Very serious, very potent Suncor. And then there's the rest of the team, which doesn't really focus on Sun that much. In UU, Cleavor, Magnazone, Moltres G, all very strong attackers in their own right. In RU, Klefki and Dragauji. In NU, Serena, Frostlass, and Tauros, Paldean, Blaze. And in PU, Komala and Persian A. You'll notice that some of these mons have these pink borders around them. Those are the Terra captains for each roster. So for Lava Ridge, it is going to be Cleavor and Tauros Paldean. And as you can see, our fourth topic of the day, we will move on to what exactly those Terra types are going to be. For All for Nada, OU, Toxapex Clodsire, Big Fat. The biggest of fat, actually. And then complete opposite side, his UU, Hoopa Unbound, Zoroark H, and Tyranitar with Hoopa Unbound being a Terra Captain. Very disgusting offensive trio here. In RU, Armarouge, Zoroark. NU, some nice utility, Ditto, Colossal, and Arboliva. And finally PU, where he has 2 Terra Captains down there, Masquerain and Phalanx. For Lentima's Town, in OU, triple threat of Zapdos, Hisuian Samurott, and Cresselia. In UU, Terra Captain Lokix and Gastrodon. In RU, Crocodile, Slowbro G, and Decidueye H. NU, Terra Captain Goodra and Ursaring. And in PU, Ice-Q and Spiritomb. Pretty balanced roster overall, I would say. And then New Moon Island. In OU, Zamazenta H and Terra Captain Iron Moth, one of the few factions that opted to Terra Captain their OU pick for a whopping 9 points. Like I said, we'll get into that later on. In UU, Tornadus T, Gyarados, and Mousehold. In RU, Weavile, Palisand, and Brute Bonnet. NU, Saltstack and Uxie. And lastly, in PU, Pikachu and Veluza. Veluza Terra Captain, of course. A lot of offensive juggernauts on that team. Very potent offense I can see happening for sure, and some utility where it matters elsewhere on the roster. As for the other half of the Ruby League, defending champion in OU, Moltres and Amoonguss. In UU, Quaquaval and Salamence. RU, triple threat Fortress, Mudsdale, Gardevoir. And then really unique tactic here in NU, 3 Mons, Terra Captains in Umbreon and the Dunsparce, and then regular Electros, and then PU Terra Captains as well in Luxray Haunter. Very unique strategy. I think Spike knows that people are going to be less inclined to ban the lower tiers, so he would rather have that Terra mix-up on deck at pretty much all costs. I think that's pretty damn interesting. For Call Island Speedstars, in OU, Heatran, Iron Hands. UU, Hydreigon, Terra Captain Thunderous T, and Quagsire. In RU, Slitherwing, Toedscool, Sylveon. NU, Muck, Terra Captain Houndstone. PU, Rabska, Go-Go. Name of the game is Bulk. Bulky offense in particular. Not a really fast team. Truthfully, there are a lot of factions. They don't have really fast. Usually your team's either really, really fast, or you have maybe 1 or 2 mons that are above 100. So we're gonna see some really interesting interactions between teams in terms of like speed creeping and all that, that I think will matter a lot in some of these sets. Then for the Veilstone Valiants for Will, you have in OU, Mascot Iron Valiant and Corviknight. In UU, Terra Captain Iron Treads, Ceruledge and Hawlucha. In RU, Inteleon and Bisharp. In NU, Grimmsnarl, Rotom-Mow, and Articuno's G. And in PU, Terra Captains Pincurchin and Weird Deer. Electric Terrain seems to be the goal here with 2 future Paradox Mons. You got Hawlucha, Ceruledge can set up, Weird Deer can set up, and as well as screen support. So you know what the game plan seems to be for Veilstone. And then finally in Ruby League for Treasure Town, we have OU Mons, Roaring Rune, Meowscarada, and Azu. Really dangerous triple threat. Gets worse down the line. UU, Terra Captain Reggie Drago and Slowking. In RU, Brambleghast, Toxtricity, and Iron Thorns. NU, Terra Captain Blissey and Orthworm. And in PU, Rotom Frost and Doug Trio. There are precisely 3, maybe 4 mons here that are designed to be defensive. Everyone else is going to punch you in the mouth. Very offensive team here from Treasure Town. On to Sapphire League. New Bark Town. Only 1 OU. This was a bit of a mishap in the draft. TJ not paying, trying to adopt a weird, unique strategy, pick and choose in the lower tiers where he so pleases, but as a result, ended up with only 1 OU mon, that being Lilligant H. But 3 separate tiers where he has 3 at his disposal. In UU, Lycanroc, Dusk, Terra Captain Volcanion, and Talonflame. In RU, Tornadus I, Kilowattrel, and Zarude. In NU, Terra Captain Typhlosion, Salazzle, and Decidueye. And in PU, Raichu and Glimmet. The only non-PU technically Mon that is used for PU that is just straight up Little Cup. Only Little Cup Mon, well, outside of Pikachu, I suppose. So yeah, one of two rather, Glimmet and Pikachu down there. For Mount Hokulani, OU triple threat of Greninja, Sneasler, and Gargasalt. In UU, Terra Captain Caesar, Donphan, and Amorous-Therian. In RU, Vaporeon and Overqwil. In NU, Mismagius and Appleton, Mismagius being a Terra Captain. And in PU, Alolan Raichu and Jumpluff, really there for moral support. This is like I feel like a pretty standard Kami team where he has 2 or 3 mons that are really, really going to open you up, and everyone else you're going to have to find a way to break past, and have, whittle you down and just tear you apart, little by little until one of the big threats is there to just tear the whole thing apart. For Mali City, in OU, triple threat of Great Tusk, Rotom Wash, and Hatterene, super defensive. In UU, Terra Captain Arcanine H, Alolan Muck, and Gengar. In RU, Bronzong and Thunderous Eye. In NU, Terra Captain Scyther and Hoopa. And in PU, Chansey and Carbink. This is a standard Kevin team. He loves bulk. He loves playing the slow game. He loves making people have to make bad decisions because, the frustration of not being able to put that much damage on. Very, very, very fat roster. And then lastly, Humalao. Perhaps the single dangerous OU combination, King Gambit, Dragonite, Ting-Lu. In UU, Haxorus, Alomomola, and Chestnut. In RU, Typhlosion H and Terra Captain Azelf. In NU, Avalugg and Terra Captain Jolteon. And in PU, both Terra Captains, Zangoose and Swalot. Again, just that OU trio really, really sticks out. And there's also Haxorus and Azelf and even Jolteon down in NU. There are some really, really, really scary offensive mons on this team. Which has always really been Kobu's go-to. He's just going to try to outplay you and let the offensive threats do what they need to do. And then for the second half of the Sapphire League, Lavender Town's OU trio of Cinderace, Garchomp, returning from Season 4 for Logan, and Pelipper. In UU, Terra Captain Basculegion Female, Screamtail and Tinkaton. In RU, Palmot and Espeon. In NU, Glastrier and Floatzel. And in PU, Terra Captains in Charizard and Ampharos. Logan is going to take up the Styles mantle and try to run Rain this season, is what it looks like. Pelipper and Basculegion and Floatzel as like the main core. Garchomp seems to be, pretty good, considering that it's a ground type, is going to make those electric types really annoyed. And then, Palmot as an electric type and Ampharos as well can probably do some damage in particular. For Verbank, in OU, Enamorous Eye, Sandy Shocks and Glamora. In UU, Breloom and Iron Jugulus. In RU, Terra Captains in Slowbro and Basculegion Male, as well as Rotom Heat. In NU, Heracross and Sneasel H. And in PU, Cloth and Berserker. It's a really interesting group of mons. We'll see how Muffin and Coach Dom make some cohesion out of it. There are some really, really interesting pieces here. In particular, that NU duo is quite strong for NU. We'll see whether one of those two can break out on offense this season. For the new Bark Blix, in OU, Mascot, Dragapult, as well as Landorus Therium. In UU, Rillaboom, Cyclizard, and Ursaluna. RU, Terra Captains in Diancie and Tauros Paldean Water, as well as Wochen. In NU, Toxicroak and Mesprit. And in PU, Pyroar and Doxboom. Rhino, I would say drafted very well for someone who has never entered a draft league, doesn't really play competitive that much, has a little bit of experience, but I don't think he's been playing recently. But I like this draft, especially at the top. Like his OUU RU core, I think, is like very strong. There are some really annoying combinations out of these 6 mons. And then lastly, Humalao City, which was drafted by Dom. Trey unfortunately could not be here for the draft. So his team really is basically the August usage chart leaders on Smogon. In OU, Golden Gold, Slowking G, and Dondozo. In UU, Skeledirge, Zapdos G, and Gudra H. In RU, Terra Captains, Mimikyu, and Noivern. NU, Sandaconda, Metacham, and in PU, Spidops and Glaceon. This doesn't really feel like a trade team, but at the same time, I don't think this is a bad team at all. Because again, he really just went, top usage in each of those tiers. So you're gonna get some mons that are gonna, take care of business where they're at. So we'll see what Trey does with this roster. I think this is stronger than what he's had in the past, at least in season 1, maybe not necessarily season 2. I'd like to think so, but we'll have to see. Obviously, you got to go out and play the games. Those matter more. And so those are the full rosters for season 5. Moving on to the Terra Captains. These are going to be in the same position as the factions were revealed earlier. Lava Ridge. So Cleavor will basically... First off, let's actually explain the Terra Captain rules. So it's basically going off a point system. You get to pick Terra Captains based on a 10-point cap, and you can maximize it however way you want. There is no limit. So OU is 9, UU 7, RU 5, so on and so forth. So most people typically go for 2, a UU and NU, or an OU and a PU, maybe your 2 RUs. But if you like to mess around in the lower tiers, you can end up with 3, maybe even 4. For Lava Ridge, Cleavor chooses Rock and Ground. Each Pokemon is going to have 1 Stab Terra type and 1 non-Stab Terra type. Doesn't matter for what reason you want to use it, whether it's offense or defense. That is up to the GM's discretion. And so Lava Ridge for Cleavor has Rock and Ground. For Tauros, Paldean Blaze, Stab, Fire, Non-Stab, Fairy. For Alfornada, for Hoopa Unbound, Dark and Poison. Shore up some of the weaknesses, and as well as power up that Gunk Shot. Masquerain, Bug, and Steel. Steel in the event that it wants to Quiver Dance and get a little goofy, a little silly. Phalanx for Fighting and Ghost. For Lentima's Town, Low Kicks gets Dark and Fire. Fire, an interesting combination. Likely just to avoid getting burned. I think it's a pretty solid defensive typing for an offensive threat. And then for Gudra, Dragon, and then Fairy. For New Moon Island, again, one of the few factions that opted to pick OU as a Terra Captain. Stab, Fire, non-stab Grass to power up those energy balls. And then Veluza in PU for Water type for stab, and then Dark type for non-stab. Again, I think, to shore up some of those weaknesses, particularly to Dark and Ghost. For Sunny Shore, again, this was the really interesting one. Opted for 4 Terra Captains, 2 NUs, 2 PUs. For Umbreon, Dark and then Fairy, more of a defensive. Same thing for the Dunsparce, normal stab, and then Water, non-stab. Luxray, Electric Stab, normal non-stab to make those facades hit extra hard. And then for Haunter, Ghost Stab, and then Fighting, non-stab. Those Focus Blasts are going to hit really, really hard. And also does a pretty good job of shoring up a few of its weaknesses. For Akala Island, Thunder's T, Flying type stab, Ice type non-stab, get that Bolt Beam coverage. And then for Houndstone, Ghost type stab, and then Fighting non-stab for Body Press. And again, for a few weaknesses to shore up. For Veilstone, Iron Treads, ground type stab for those earthquakes, and then electric type non-stab, which again, if you're going to be running terrain, I think that's a pretty good, interesting option. And you lose the weakness to water, fighting and all that stuff. You're only weak to ground at that point, so I think that's really interesting. Pincurchin goes electric and then grass for non-stab. To resist EQs, makes sense. Pincurchin is pretty solidly fat as long as there's not a ground type about to hit it. Then Weird Deer, normal stab, Fairy non-stab. You see a lot of Fairy non-stabs. I think that's more for defensive mons, but also setup mons as well, which Weird Deer kind of counts as both, so that's very understandable. And lastly, for Treasure Town, you have Reggie Drago, Dragon Stab, Steel Non-Stab. We will be hitting those fairies. Reggie Drago finally has the coverage that it's been waiting for, which is literally anything that isn't just Dragon. And then Blissey, which has normal stab, and then Terra non-stab. Makes sense, its only weakness is fighting. And sometimes Blissey would want to throw off a Shadow Ball now and then, so I think it's, you know, a fair Terra type to have. Moving on to the Sapphire League. For New Bark Town, you have Volcanion, Terra Stab Fighting, and non-Terra Stab Ground. Ground is a really interesting one. I'm very interested in seeing how CJ plays this one, because Ground is definitely not the first non-stab Terra type I would have thought for Volcanion, but he might have a plan. Let's see what he's got. You know, his draft was very specific, so I'm interested in seeing what he's going to pull off. And then he has Typhlosion, Terra Stab Fighting for Eruption, and then Grass as the non-stab. For Mount Hokulani, Caesar with Steel and then Fire. Again, you know, A, shores up that fire weakness. B, covers for Will-O-Wisp. Makes sense. Caesar, you know, is going to be a really strong physical attacker, so I will never blame anyone for turning their non-fire type into a fire type for that reason. And then Miss Magius, Ghost Stab, Fairy non-stab. For Mali City, Arcanine H, Fire Stab. Interesting over Rock, but maybe he doesn't want to chance the Head Smash miss. You know, that Terra Rock Head Smash hits unbelievably hard, but there is the chance to miss, so maybe Kevin would rather play it safe, go for the Fire Blitz. That's still going to hurt really, really hard, so I respect it. And then, of course, the non-stab, normal for the E-Speed. And then Scyther with Terra Flying, and then non-Terra Fighting. You know, CCs, fixes some of the weaknesses. Humalao, Kobu, also has 4 Terra Captains, different layout than Spike's. 1 RU, 1 NU, and 2 PUs. For Azelf, Terra Psychic, obviously has the only stab. And then Steel for the non-Terra. I like this one a lot because Steel doesn't have very many weaknesses. One of them is Ground. Azelf has Levitate. So that's one weakness out the window. For Jolteon, Electric and Ice, of course, Bolt Beam coverage. For Zangoose, a normal stab and then Ghost non-stab makes sense. You know, much like Blissey, cover its only weakness. And then Swalot, Poison Stab, and then Ghost Non-Stab. I am not entirely sure what the Ghost Non-Stab is about, but Kobu, as we all know, very strong player, very smart player. I'm sure he's got something cooking in the back with that one. And then on to Lavender Town, Basket Legion Female, Water Terra Stab, of course, Dark Terra Stab, same case as Veluza, you know, help cover those weaknesses, Ghost types. Turning into Dark types makes a lot of sense. And then 2 PUs, Charizard, Fire Stab, and then Steel, Non-Stab. That will help specifically with that rock weakness a lot. For Electric, or for Ampharos, Stab, Terra Electric. Fairy Non-Stab, again, I think just when you want to have a, you know, more defensive Mon, like Ampharos usually runs like Assault Vest. Fairy type makes sense, you just don't really want to get punished by a lot. People don't really bring Poison and Steel type offense, so that makes a lot of sense. Slowbro for Verbank, again, makes sense. That Fairy Non-Stab, and then the Water Stab. And then Basket Legion Male, Water Stab, Ice Non-Stab. This one is a little interesting. Didn't go for Dark type, much like Lowly did. Went for Ice instead, I think wanting to really get in on that offense. And I think it makes sense, because, you know, one of the few types that can take water pretty well is Grass. Ice coverage absolutely smokes it. For New Bark Rhino, you have Diancie, Rock Stab, help those Diamond Storms, and then Water Non-Stab, very, very smart. Diancie has quite a few weaknesses. The only thing that really stops that Mon, I think, from being very good, like extremely good in the draft format, and I still think it's very good. Water Defensive Terror will help a lot. And then Tauros, Paldean Aqua, Fighting Stab, and then Grass Non-Stab, again, to help cover some weaknesses. And then lastly, Humalao City, Mimikyu, Ghost Stab, makes sense for Shadow Claw and Shadow Sneak. And then Steel Non-Stab, makes sense, covers, you know, Steel, defensive Steel covers Fairy very, very well. So that's a very good defensive type. And then last but not least, Noivern, Dragon Stab, normal non-stab. Again, makes a lot of sense. Boom Burst. Terra Stab, Boom Burst. It's going to hit really, really hard, even though Noivern is not the strongest attacker in the world. So he goes full in on offense there. I respect that. So like I said, this is going to be a quick one. So we're going to go into the last topic of the day. It's a pretty basic graphic. I didn't really have enough time to really fuss this out, and I apologize for that. We will be fixed up next week when I have a whole 7 days to get this underway. But just, you're probably thinking, why did you put the standings here? And I really meant to put both. That's my fault. I really messed that one up. But it was mostly just to, show, hey, everybody's sitting at 0-0, right? Just to let you know, the standings will be here in the future. So we're gonna have to cover the standings every week. And then lastly, the actual schedule itself. First week of the season is all intra-league, so you get to play your league rivals. So this is weeks 1 and 4 are going to be the big weeks to try to get a leg up on your league standings. Because obviously having those head-to-head against your division opponents matters a lot. Tonight's versus Seeker, we have 2 matches on deck. I am not sure what the order is going to be, but one of those matches is going to be New Bark versus Mount Hukulani. Rhino versus Kami. The Dominican Death Match, as it's nicknamed. It's going to be Rhino's debut as a GM. Kami, obviously a very strong player, so that's going to be a really, really strong first test for Rhino, I believe. I think it's really interesting. And then the other versus Seeker match on for tonight is Sunny Shore versus Akala Island, V versus Spike. A rematch of not only last season's Sapphire League Finals, but the season before's Sapphire League Finals. So Season 3 and Season 4 League Finals in the Sapphire Division was Vasser versus Spike. So you will see those two face yet again. This is the 3rd season in a row that they've also been in the same division. So in 2 seasons and 1 week, me and Spike will have played 7 times. That's a pretty considerable rivalry. Spike does have the season, series lead 4-2, but 1-1 in playoff sets. So, I think that's one of the big rivalries to watch out for that already exists in this league. Obviously, with the new season, we got a lot of new GMs. There's, a lot of talent out there. There are going to be some new rivalries that are going to form, obviously. But I really think that these are 2 really exciting matches that we have on deck. So, yeah, that is going to cover this week's episode of the NWBA Wonder Room. Dom and Wheezy are finishing up the reveal show. So as soon as they go live, or as soon as I get the word, I'll send y'all over to their channel and we can get the festivities for Season 5 started. For those of you watching on YouTube or on Twitch, thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. We're bringing this back every single week before versus Seeker. So next week we will have the week 1 recap and the week 2 look ahead, and this will continue all the way to the playoffs. And like I said, try to squeeze 1 or 2 episodes into the playoffs, maybe a playoff prediction, and then maybe one last big wrap up, talk about the championships and all that, and see how that goes from there. Maybe squeeze one in between for All-Star season or All-Star week. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all